Hey, what's up guys? It's Wes. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a program I've had on my radar for years now and never had the chance to really dig in and learn what it's all about. But today, that changes, and I'm very excited to present to you my initial thoughts on heavy paint. Now, heavy paint is something that's always come up in kind of my ranking videos and things like that. And funnily enough, I've been actually emailing with the creator and owner of Heavy Paint, Vaughn, who reached out, saw one of my ranked videos and was like, hey man, like your stuff. Have you ever tried heavy paint? And the answer sadly was no, kind of embarrassing. But he was like, hey, let me hook you up. Got me a license for the mobile version and for the desktop version. However, I had to one-up him and I bought the desktop version anyway. So, so these opinions are my own. I did talk with Vaughn beforehand, but he has no idea what this review is going to be. I wouldn't even really call it a review. I just got to dabble with it a little bit. We're going to be taking a look at a time lapse of the desktop version, which is actually free to try and free to use. I'm going to put that link in the description below. But yeah, all these thoughts are my own. This was my first time ever using the program. And let me tell you, it makes you change your method a little bit, but that's not always a bad thing. So without further ado, let's go take a deep dive, or fairly deep dive look into my first impressions with heavy paint. All right, and here we go, digging into heavy paint. Like I said, I'm going to have a link to this in the description below. And yeah, you can use this basically for free. Now, there are a few of the brushes and I believe a few of the settings that are not available unless you buy the license. But what's kind of nice about it is once you get the license, all you have to really do is log in, and you can use it on any browser that you got. And I used it on my third monitor, so I have a Huey on Canvas 22. That I use for work all the time. So yeah, I just drug basically the Chrome browser over to the monitor and just started using it like any other paint program. And I've seen a lot about heavy paint, but to be completely honest, the reason why I never tried it before is I was nervous. I was nervous to try it because if you've been a fan of the channel for a while, of course, thank you for your support. If you're brand new, welcome. But I am very much a painter. I like getting my hands dirty. I come from a very traditional background, so a lot of oil paint and turpentine and solvents and, acrylics and, watercolors, which I'm terrible at. But, you know what I mean? The more tactile kind of traditional stuff, and how best to emulate that on a digital workspace. So a lot of Rebel, a lot of, Art Rage and Corel Painter and the new Krita stuff. And so I'm very much, keen on trying to find the most traditional feeling brushes that I can find, because that's where my comfort zone is. That's what I'm used to. I'm used to filberts and I'm used to flats and things like that. This is a whole different animal. So if I were to kind of sum up what I thought before going in and now what I think about heavy paint, just based on this initial first painting, and I am going to be using it more, and we'll do some updated videos down the line. The more I use it, the more I get used to it. But whenever I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is like almost like an MS Paint, but really for hardcore painters, or like digital artists, I should say, which, there's a lot of overlap in those skills, but digital has its own way of thinking. If you've ever done traditional and tried to learn digital, there's a big learning curve, because there's a lot of stuff like your layer management and like what my exporting and what's the sRGB color, there's a lot of this type of stuff, a lot of the kind of minutia and the devil in the details as far as working with digital files, working with light instead of working with pigment. Because as you're stacking light sources and all that stuff, we'll go into color theory all day if we wanted to, but it's a different way to think. You have to think differently when you make the jump from traditional to digital. And now I got so used to working with these beautiful painting programs that really try to handhold you in the traditional sense of how brushes work and maybe how the color blending theory works, that jumping to something that is 100% unabashed, pure digital art is tough. So I was like, okay, is this going to be like an MS Paint thing? Is this going to be, is this very just like using the lasso tool, like making coloring and shapes and filling it with blocks and doing, thinking very geometrically about this stuff. And then as I was using it, it started becoming way more comfortable. So it did start that way. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? It's a hard brown brush. Yeah, I can lower the opacity, but it doesn't feel the same. What is this brush? And it's like almost like vector art. I know it's not vector, but you can see the math happening as you put down brush strokes. You know what I mean? It's like putting down pixels of pigment and stretching them across the canvas. It feels completely foreign compared to what I'm used to and what I've kind of learned and trained up for. But as I kept using the different tools and I was looking at the tools, and there was like really interesting moments to where I had, like if you have the blending tool, kind of like the gradient tool up in the upper right, I think I do it later on whenever I want to start getting some transitions and values. Whenever you drag the brush from one color and you kind of like connect the dots from one color to another color, it automatically makes the gradient that does like a perfect transition into that. It does that algorithm and it just like maps it out perfect, right? Kind of mind blowing. Like whenever I saw it and it was changing the gradient in real time based on where my mouse or where my stylus was, I was blown away. I was like, this needs to be in everything. This is perfect. Like it's real, it's fast. You can see it immediately without even picking up the stylus. Like I was converted. Like it's that type of stuff. So this is very much made for digital artists. However, much like kind of a Procreate did, Vaughn really knows his stuff as far as like art theory. And whenever you're using an oil brush, why do you want to use that brush as opposed to a watercolor brush or a hard round brush? What choices are you making when you choose what brush from the list? And I know that sounds a little maybe esoteric and not very forward facing, I guess, but he understands painting, because there is a reason you would pick an oil brush or a filbert or a flat versus a palette knife. They do different things. And very much so, the compartmentalized brushes in this program do different things. It's not, oh, well, here's the same brush, but this one's kind of wetter around the edges, or it blends a little more, or whatever, or like the flow is set differently. You can change all that, but really, if you're picking a brush, there's a distinct thing that brush does, and you can try to use it somewhere else or somehow else, but it does one thing super well. So like all of your fan brushes, it's not going to give you a perfectly, from the default settings and stuff, it's not going to give you a perfect fan look. It's almost going to give you this like almost a lasso tool, color jitter. Like it made me rethink about what marks am I putting on the canvas? And that's very powerful, because you really have to think. It's going to make me a better painter. I guarantee heavy paint is going to make me a better artist, because I'm going to have to know exactly why I'm putting my stylus down on that screen, whether it's the mobile version, the desktop version. You got to know. There's no, well, maybe I can get away with this and maybe I can smudge this around and push this over. Like, I'm sure at a certain point you can get there, but I think trying to use heavy paint the same way you would use a Art Rage or Rebel or Photoshop or Procreate is actually doing it a disservice. It's actually trying to, make everything a hammer. If all you got a hammer, everything's a nail, right? I think that's what you kind of run into is if you're trying to use heavy paint like you would use any other art program, it's going to be kind of a rough go at first. I will say the saving grace for me was the watercolor brush, because the watercolor brush does feel very much like a Clip Studio paint or Krita, or kind of a wet edge based on opacity, on how much pressure you're putting down. And, I'm talking more in like the default settings of these things. I didn't really tweak with stuff. I wanted to know how this felt out of the box for my initial go round. There's always time now that I have the licenses, and now that we can just use the browser version of this anytime on really any device, which is still mind blowing to me. There's time to mess with the dials and phone, like get it really dialed in and have it feel the way you want it to feel. But I wanted to see, okay, what's the approach? What was Vaughn's idea and what was his mindset? Just making the defaults. So not only are you picking the brush for a certain reason, there's probably a reason why the defaults, like the default settings for each brush, are the way they are. So let me try to use that. Let me try to use it out of the box, no tweaks. I didn't even use multiple layers. It was embarrassingly, it was like 10 minutes into it before I realized, oh, there is a layers panel. Oh, okay. But I was just painting and I was like, okay, let's just do it. One layer. Let's go. Let's see how all these brushes interact with each other. How does this all work? And the more I used it, the more it kind of got like addictive, because I wanted to see what would happen. It's almost like, throwing water on a watercolor right before it sets, and then you see what kind of chaos happens. It's that effect, but it's every time you put down the brush, like put down or make a mark with a stylus. It got really fun. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I could use that tool in this way and see what could happen. Like, I will tell you the straight line tool, the one where you just put the stylus down, and you draw a line where you want it, and then it just kind of extends out until you're done, and then you'll let go, and then, okay, there's the line. I use that the same way I probably would like a hard round brush, because you really can just box in your shapes, box in your silhouettes, make sure that looks okay. Here you can see I was doing kind of a skull study on the books, and there's a feather and the ink, quill and stuff in the front. But I wanted to use crazy colors. I've seen a lot of like loud artwork made with heavy paint. And I was like, okay, let me start with a deep blue instead of like the ochre-y sort of classical painting stuff. It's like, okay, let me start with a saturated color and see what we get into. And then, doing a blue and then making the skull. Initially, it was kind of a yellow color. So you already have yellow and blue just really almost clashing, But somehow it worked. Like, the tools give you that ability to shape this, whatever you're working on, into something that you cannot replicate in any other painting program. You just can't. You would have to go out of your way, way out of your way, to make any other painting program feel like this. Like, heavy paint is really a one-of-a-kind thing. It is super unique. And I know that's, unique means it's different, so how could it be super unique? But it genuinely is, because I know whenever I turn it on, my brain has to kick over to the different gear. Instead of doing I'm going to do a pencil sketch, and then I might do some value stuff under it, and then I might do a color overlay, and then, I'll blend it in, and then I'll merge the layer, and then I'll, I have a very specific working method that I do for clients and I do for myself. With heavy paint, it's like, what happens if I click this button? And what happens if I drag this over here? And ooh, look at that little spray paint, the airbrush thing, and it does these cool little like glitched out pixels. How can I use that? And like, can that like be texture the same way, if we're all fans of Craig Mullins? So it's like, he has amazing texture in his work. Maybe heavy paint is something that if I needed something very textural, let me go in and mess with these crazy algorithm-based, like weird flattened shape brushes that have this texture on it that like warble as you add it on there. Just super interesting. And like the color jitter, You don't have to go into 7 different menus like, okay, well, I'm going to go to the brush and then my brush settings and then the properties of the brush and then color properties. And then I'm going to look at the jitter and then change the hue jitter and then the value or lightness or whatever. Like, no. It's a slider on the main menu. And you either crank it up to get a full chromatic, like spectacle, or you can turn it to 1 and 2. So you're still in the same, you're an analogous color theory. You know what I mean? You're going to have slightly different hues, a little bit of change in value, but not much. It's really beautiful. Like the way how quickly you can do that. And you're automatically giving your piece more interest. And it's funny because now that I've used HEAVYPAINT, and I've used it a few more times that I didn't record, but the more I'm using it, the more I'm like, I need to integrate some of this stuff into some of my brushes on my other programs. I need to really start messing with some of these jitter settings and some of it's the controlled chaos of it. And I'm like, maybe there's something to this, because if you can get those different like surprises with every single brush stroke, it's super engaging. It's super engaging. It really does make you think about painting differently and like making your image differently, because part of it's not up to you. It's up to how the tool is going to be used. So I would say, like, if you've been on the fence about it, or if you've only used it a little bit and you want to use it some more, go in there with kind of a general idea. Don't try to make some like photorealistic master study copy of something. Get yourself a still life or get yourself a reference photo or whatever, and try to make something very stylized. Try using weird colors you've never used before, and like maybe dynamic shapes that you haven't used before, or maybe like zoom in on a specific thing or mess with proportions. Like really start stretching out what you normally do. Get out of that comfort zone. Try to go a little bit deeper in the pool, where your feet can't touch anymore, right? Like you have to kind of tread water a little bit, and you're like, oh, well, now I'm here and I haven't been here before, and what's going to happen? There's something really powerful and like energetic about that. And that was a huge eye-opening thing for me, because I've been kind of in an art rut. I know I've been studying a lot. I've been doing more live streams. I've been doing more quote unquote traditional illustration stuff. Like, okay, I need to work on my anatomy and the gesture and the this and the this. And, what's the line weight of this versus that? Like very much getting in the craftsmanship or draftsperson side of things on illustration. But sometimes you have to let loose like this. You have to just let the chips fall where they may, go in, kind of wrangle it to the best of your ability, and start surprising yourself. Because as you're putting those brushstrokes down, it's going to cause chaos. Absolutely. This is not a painting program if you are wary. If you're worried about what the overall outcome is going to be, I think you might have a longer learning curve with HEAVYPAINT. Just because, not to say you can't control it. You totally can. You can turn off jitter. You can do multiple layers. You can mess with the brush properties. You change the flow and opacity of like the hard round brush, and you have a soft round and airbrush and chalk brushes. Like you can use it like a standard painting program. For sure you can. I just think the beauty of HEAVYPAINT and the real power of it comes from allowing the chaos to happen. You could even use this as a great way to make a weird textured underpainting or like a canvas that you could then take into another painting program and finish up. Like I'm actually wanting to do that. I'm wanting to make some sort of stylized illustration, but I would love to use HEAVYPAINT to block out the main shapes. Maybe some value here or there, because you can also lower the saturation super easy of every brush. It's amazing. It's literally a slider. You just go whoop, and then you're done. I know it's sliders and other stuff too, but the way the UI is set up, especially kind of on the browser default, is super easy. It took me about 3 minutes to figure out what everything did. I was like, what's that do? Oh, that's the brush size. What's that do? Oh, that's the color jitter. Oh, and here's my color box. oh, and this one's saturation, and then this one is just a color picker. Perfect, great, done. It's everything I need. It's very smartly put together. Vaughn did a great job of, like I said, he knows what he's doing. The things that you need are right there. You know what I mean? Like, you don't need to go searching around and clicking in 10 different menus. And no. This is fast. This is iterative. It's dynamic. It's fresh. It's super fun. Super fun to use. And yeah, but I'm planning on using this to make some like underpainting stuff. And, that way I can bring it in and stretch it out and have some chaos on the canvas before I get started, because it's just going to make for more interesting paintings. And it really just does make for a more interesting way to think about paintings too. And that's worth its weight in gold, man. Like, I'm glad. And I'm very, very, thrilled and humbled that, he wanted to give me a license and all that stuff. But I'm glad I bought it. I'm glad I also gave money, and I'm probably going to buy it again. I might buy some gift copies for people on my Discord or something like that, because I'm like, this is the real deal. It's something different. I think this is a super valuable asset to add to your arsenal. So if you already have Krita, if you already have like Clip Studio Paint or Photoshop or Rebel or Art Rage or whatever, this is going to be a perfect, I'm not even going to say like a side dish. I was going to say side dish with like a main course, but no, this is powerful enough. I mean, this is another type of main course. You know what I mean? This is just another option. Making a full painting in this, I think, would be a fun exercise. I think this would be a fun thing to approach and see if I could do it. Because at a certain point, I've always been trained this way. And this is actually some of the stuff that I hate about the way that I work. It's almost like you get to a certain point and then you're like, okay, enough fun. Now I have to finish the painting, which is a terrible way to go about it. But that's what happens when you're trained in like an atelier setting where it's very like the rigor is very high. It's very rigorous. Okay, you did this, you blocked it out, you did this, you put your shapes in. Now you have to render. Now you have to work on final. There's a reason why art is a profession. It is a job. And now you spent the first 5 hours building it. Now you spend the next 15 rendering. And this can hopefully kind of shake those cobwebs out, kind of get me out of that mindset. So super happy that I was able to use this. And it's its own thing. Like, heavy paint is absolutely its own thing. And I really appreciate that. It's very hard to be a genuine original article nowadays. You know what I mean? Something that's really different, like truly inspired and really different. Because now even in the digital painting space, a lot of programs are borrowing from a lot of other programs, and a lot of these programs start feeling very much alike, which, I find is a blessing sometimes, because it's like I can jump from, I sincerely have 12 painting programs installed on my computer right now. I can open up any of them and kind of work the same way, right? They all have the layer management. They all have this stuff, and I can do a multiply layer and do that, and then this, and then this. Like, I can use my working method across the spectrum. But with heavy paint, it's more exciting to be able to open it up and be like, okay, what's heavy paint going to give me this time? Like, I'm at the mercy of the court. You know what I mean? Like, show me, like, I'm going to try to put some shapes in. I'm going to do this thing and have some shape compositions and maybe some, dynamic, the structure of the piece. How's that going to be? And then let me get some colors in there. Now let me jitter it out. Let me shake things up. It's almost like putting all the ingredients in a big crock pot, like shaking it up and seeing what happens. And just, it's different. It is different. And there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of beauty in it. But that's it. That's my overall first impressions of heavy paint. I really want to use this more and more. And a huge shout out to Vaughn for reaching out. And it's been a pleasure to speak with him and talk to him. And it's really been a pleasure to work with heavy paint, because like, this thing is awesome. And it's so just fresh. It's invigorating. Like, it makes me want to open it again and see what other, like rascally rabbit stuff I can get into. Like it's almost like being a troublemaker, you know. You have this controlled area where you can be like, hey, I'm just gonna break something. I'm gonna see what happens, and it's like really like there's a lot of spice to it, and that's really cool. But anyway, yeah. So huge shout out to Vaughn. I will have links in the description below for HEAVYPAINT. Like I said, try it for free on the browser. I promise you, even if you just use your mouse, you don't even get your art gear out or whatever, you use it in the browser and you mess around with some of these brushes, you're going to be like, whoa, what does that do? What? Well, what if I did this? And once you start thinking that way, well, what if I mix this one with that one? And what happens if I use this color on that? And then I smudge it with using that brush with this texture on it. You're off to the races, because it's madness. It's madness, but it's the best kind of way, because you're constantly engaged. You're using it. It's just so much fun. Man, now I want to go open it again. But that's it. That's my time. Thank you so much for hanging out. Yeah, we go live every Saturday, really just on YouTube now. I'm still trying to figure out the way to do the multi-streaming thing, but the past few times I tried it, all the stuff that I used, not naming any names, but other programs I used and stuff, they just aren't working. Things are dropping out. So we're just going to try to do the best we can here on YouTube for a little bit. And then, you know, if people, if the crowd demands it, if the people speak and, you know, and we definitely want to listen when they do, if they want Twitch, if they want that type of thing, we can do that as well. But yeah, for right now, we're going to focus on the YouTube stuff. And that's it, man. I'm so excited, so happy to use it. Yeah, go out. You know the drill. Go make cool art. Definitely, you're going to be making some really cool art with HEAVYPAINT. But until we talk again, yeah, I'll catch you next time. Peace.